What do they need to shift in their beliefs so that they can adopt the, spend a dollar now to make $3 later?
How do we continue to add value to this asset? And that is really a mindset shift away from the short-term gain and more towards long-term strategy, long-term investing.
And you have to make something that somebody wants to buy at the end of the day. Nobody wants to buy the misery that sometimes some of our are finding themselves in. If you're feeling trapped, nobody wants to buy your trap. What are some of the other ways of measuring success or measuring that return on investment that might not be so obvious?
Do our people have more time? When we think about capacity, it's not just capacity to take on more work, it's actually capacity for everything. Do I have more capacity to be at my kids' softball games, be on vacation, to be unplugged while still growing the firm, having the firm meet their...
It doesn't matter how much time I'm at my desk. It matters how much I'm benefiting my client. And that just uncoupling those two things, time and value, is huge.
We may have to change some other things too, and then put these programs in place where we're increasing capacity for more free time for your people without sacrificing revenue.
Change is painful, especially for people like us.
A firm has to be open to change. We can't be super committed to the way we've always done it, because so much of this adding value and building capacity requires us to do things differently. We can't keep doing it the way we've always done it and expect a different result.
Welcome to Max Value, the show for business owners and their trusted advisors who are on a mission to maximize their value with business valuation, exit planning, strategy, and investing in your company's future. I'm your host, Ben Town, and today we are joined by our guest, Erin Daiber, a CPA turned leadership coach and founder of Well Balanced Accountants. She helps accounting firms grow firm value through stronger leaders, healthier cultures, and smarter succession, measured with real outcomes. Welcome, Erin.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben.
Yeah, very excited to have you here. Thank you. So you work with a lot of CPA firm owners. You've been there, in their brains, and so you understand the challenges and the mindset. So what evolved you, or how did you evolve from working as a CPA to working as a leadership coach for CPAs?
Well, I learned pretty early on in my career that the numbers side of accounting, the debits and the credits, were not what was going to get me out of bed in the morning. It's not what was most exciting for me about the role. So I only stayed in public accounting for about 4 years. I spent some time then in industry. And that's when I began the self-discovery of trying to understand what really I wanted to do and what difference I wanted to be making. And through sort of a roundabout path, ended up in professional services on the other side as a coach, a strategist, working back with my people, the accountants. So I'm really excited to have made that transition. It has allowed me to tap into more of that strategic problem solving side and incorporate some creativity, but still be contributing to the profession that means a lot to me and to the people that I really enjoy working with. So it's a win-win.
Oh, that's amazing. And that's really cool, because that's exactly how I feel about it. I feel about being a CPA and yet not doing real CPA work anymore, quote unquote, even though, I do professional services with business valuation and exit planning, et cetera. But no, I've heard that, that similar story, and kind of feeling that, feel that resonance, right? That these are my people. And I love hearing that, because they can, we can absolutely be, as CPAs, amongst our people, and yet not do exactly the same thing that, some of our other, members of the tribe are doing. So that's cool.
Yeah. And I think of it like they are so passionate about it. And as a client, somebody buying these services from a CPA, I want somebody working for me who's passionate about that. Mm-hmm. And so, from a client service perspective, I'm not the right person to do that, but I'm passionate about helping them grow their business, have the business run really smoothly, actually treat their firm like a business. And I mean, I think that's the most important, probably. But I think of my role then as supporting the people who are most passionate about what they do to do what they do best.
Absolutely. So, well, let's talk about your clients, the other members of our tribe here.
Yes.
So CPA firm owners are just like most professional service firm owners. Obviously not a stretch to say that we like taking distributions of cash out of our business. I mean, we can have as much passion as we want, but we also like to be paid for it. Um, but I know you make the argument that retaining more of that cash within the business actually eventually leads to bigger firm values. It's something that I completely agree with and believe as well.
Hmm.
But that takes a shift in mindset for firm leaders. So what do they need to do? What do they need to shift in their beliefs so that they can adopt spend $1 now to make $3 later and make that feel like an investment and not a sacrifice, not a diet?
Yeah. Well, I think of it like the analogy I often use when I'm talking with firm leaders about succession planning and exit planning is think of it like selling a house. So you have an asset, you could either be investing in it and keeping it up and doing sort of that maintenance over time to keep it a really valuable asset, and likely when you go to sell it, it's going to be worth more. You're going to get more out of it. Or you could live in that house for 20, 30 years, have tons of deferred maintenance that you've avoided and you've just been, spending on other things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're likely to not get as high of a valuation or sale price in that case when you leave. And I really think us building a business, building a firm in this case is similar, especially with how fast things are changing in our profession. We really have to be mindful about making those continual reinvestments into modernizing the firm, into developing our people so that the asset continues to build value over time. So whether you're looking at having an external sale, somebody coming in and evaluating you and actually putting a value on your practice and saying this is what we'll pay you for it, they'll be looking at those categories and those factors. Or if you're doing it internally, same thing. You want to be transitioning over a valuable asset. That increases the likelihood that your successor is going to be able to pay you over time, that business is going to continue and thrive and be profitable so they can pay your sales price over, the course of 10 or 15 years, however you structure that deal. So regardless of what the exit strategy is, that's the way I think about it, is how do we continue to add value to this asset? So you asked about a mindset shift, and that is really a mindset shift away from the short-term gain and more towards long-term strategy, long-term investing. So the short term is, well, I've got a bunch of cash now, let me pay it all out in bonuses without reinvesting back into the firm. Long term might be, yes, we can still give bonuses and be paid really well for what we do and be making these investments. And remember that those investments should be generating ROI and actually contributing back to your bottom line. So ideally, they're actually increasing the value even more so you can have both. You can have the investments and the big bonuses, the big distributions that you want.
Well, absolutely. And you have to make something that somebody wants to buy at the end of the day.
Yes.
Nobody wants to buy the misery that sometimes some of our people are finding themselves in. If
That's true.
you're feeling trapped, nobody wants to buy your trap. And
Well,
another thing. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, that just makes me think about, again, the deferred maintenance. So if we just keep going with that analogy of selling a house, I remember I sold a house several years ago and we did a lot of improvement on it before we sold it. And I remember looking around thinking, gosh, this is nicer today than it ever was when I lived in it. And now I'm going to give it to someone else. So we can think about these reinvestments into the firm like that also. Let's make it nice and get to enjoy it while we're there. Let's use these investments to improve our team, improve our efficiency, maybe be able to have more work-life integration, more work-life balance while we're there, and maybe reduce our suffering as opposed to investing and then handing it off. So it works the same way.
Absolutely. And I think it works even more in business. I mean, I love the house analogy because it's completely apt and directionally makes complete sense. But also in valuing a business, um, it's multiplicative. And so
Mhm,
that's where you get from the, invest a dollar and get three later,
mhm,
literally multiplicative. So if you are able to reinvest, I'm just making up, numbers here, but you reinvest $100 and you're able to improve your cash flow, down the road because you've increased, your personnel, your technology stack, et cetera, processes. Um, you've been able to increase your cash flow by $20.
mhm,
You get a multiple on that $20 when you finally sell it, and of course, you get $20 for however many years, you're actually running it. So it's a, everything needs to be thought of in that way,
mhm.
and it, doesn't take a lot to really make a difference there.
Absolutely.
When you approach a client, so you kinda take a de-risking approach. You have a way of allowing somebody to take small bets. So walk me through, how you approach, maybe that first 90 days or your initial playbook, to
Mm.
set up the, pilot or, whatever program that you do. And just to make sure that somebody can try something and, if it doesn't work the first time, it's not catastrophic, but if it does work, then, it's the low hanging fruit that you can just really get a lot of good benefit out of.
Mhm. Well, maybe it makes sense to take a step back and talk about what we're selling, just to give some context, because it is something that I find is a little bit challenging to buy, and that some firms have had maybe negative experiences with. So,
Mhm.
we're helping firms increase their value, their revenue, and ultimately doing that through helping them build capacity in a number of different areas. So, when we think about building capacity in a firm, you can level up your people, because then they're naturally going to be able to get more done, pass more down to the next level down. They'll just be more effective and more productive. You can get your processes and your firm modernized, whether that's technology or we're just being more efficient in how we design our processes to deliver client service. And then maybe the most part is leadership effectiveness. And a lot of time, and I'm specifically talking about the partner group, that key group in charge. And if we were talking about a business that's not a partnership, it's that C-suite group, making sure they're able to work effectively together to drive decisions, drive change, ultimately manage the business. So those are the types of services that we're selling. A lot of times it's coaching, custom programs, maybe offsites for partner groups. Not something that many firms are used to buying. Firms are used to buying technology or,
Software. Yeah.
paper and, different things like that. That it's not as easy of a purchase. And it's typically a higher investment item, maybe right there alongside the technology. So something that we do a little bit differently, because I recognize that there's some risk being taken, that we're going to invest in a program like this and we're not guaranteed to get results. So that in itself, for a group of people who tend to be a little more risk averse and
Right.
cautious about spending, especially on something that's unproven, not a sure thing, that's a challenge. So I take a slightly different approach in how I sell those programs, because it's not only to meet my buyers, my clients where they're at, but also because I really care about my clients getting ROI. I always try to pay for myself in the service that we offer within the same year as much as possible. So
Mhm.
how we do that is really through in-depth conversations up front about what problem are we solving with this. So if you're an accounting firm and you approach me about, we want to do a manager training program, that sounds great, but I'm going to still ask you a lot of questions about what's the problem that we're solving, making sure that we're putting the right solution in place that will get you the ROI. We talk in detail about how you're going to measure your return or success, right? Let's call it success. How are we going to measure whether this program, this investment was a success or not? And a lot of times we skip over that step just to get the immediate gratification of, great, I put this program in place, so now I should have better managers, or I've ticked the box, I've provided CPE. But we haven't taken those intentional steps up front to really define the problem, make sure the solution is the right one, and then identify how we're going to measure that success. So I think that's something that's a little bit different about how we do it to mitigate that risk.
That makes a lot of sense. And of course, you anticipated where my mind goes as an analyst. Well, if we're investing a certain amount, yes, if it, falls to the P&L, it's maybe something we can measure fairly easily.
Mm.
But if not, what are some of the other ways of measuring success, or, measuring that return on investment that might not be so obvious?
Yeah, and sometimes it will follow the P&L, but not in a way that you think. So a lot of times, one of the first places we go in accounting in particular is, will this save me hours? Will this make my team more efficient? Which in many cases, for instance, making them a better leader or making them more of a strategic thinker could improve their efficiency. But their time's just going to be spent somewhere else. So overall, the number of hours is not likely to change. And in some cases, for firms that are billing by the hour, we actually don't want the hours to go down too much. That negatively affects our top line. So we have to, again, think about that more strategically and really dig into what are the ways that we will measure outcomes. So is it quality of the output, right? Is there quality of their work product improving, even though the hours may not have changed? Are they getting to some of those other projects that otherwise fall to the wayside and don't ever get addressed because we're busy just dealing with the fires? Are we also looking at some other things you could measure is client satisfaction?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of firms don't do client satisfaction surveys because they're afraid of what they might hear. But if we're being really intentional about improving our client service and doing that through any of these services we've talked about, that might be something we want to measure. And it's another possible measure of ROI.
Well, I certainly know that in my small firm, I measure my own ROI based on some of the programs we do internally to make ourselves better.
Mm-hmm.
My metric is how many vacation days have I taken in that particular quarter or year.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's gone up, which is
Yay.
great.
Well, and that could be. So, and I'm actually a big advocate of that. I like the movement of firms away from this idea that everybody has to be working 55, 60, 65 hours a week. And I like a measure of, do our people have more time? And when we think about capacity, it's not just capacity to take on more work. It's actually capacity for everything. Do I have more capacity to be at my kids' softball games, to be on vacation, to be unplugged while still growing the firm, having the firm meet their revenue goals, their client service objectives, those sorts of things? So, but what that often will uncover in these early conversations with clients is we may have to change some other things too. For instance, maybe we need to move towards more of a value-based billing model versus hourly, and then put these programs in place where we're increasing capacity for more free time for your people without sacrificing revenue. So sometimes it is, and again, that's why we have to have these deeper conversations up front, is to really understand what's important. What are we measuring, and what are we, not only what we say we're measuring, but what are we actually measuring?
Right.
Because I'll put this other little underscore in here, and I see this a lot, is we may say we value and are measuring sort of productivity or output versus hours, but there's still this underlying conversation in the firm that if I'm not at my desk later than the partner, that I'm now not pulling my weight, I'm not that invested, fill in the blank. There's probably a lot more less nice ways that people describe that. But that's the underlying culture. So we need to be mindful of that too. And again, I try to understand what the environment is that we're putting programs into, make sure everyone is set up for success from the beginning.
Gosh, absolutely. And at the same time as, for example, my personal freedom, which is how I measure success, my personal freedom has increased. Getting out to all those hockey games and going to going on vacation, etc. We actually had the biggest year we've ever had last
Mm.
year. So I actually think that building that resilient capacity is absolutely something that's correlated with being able to then take some time away. And man, I hate this concept that, oh yeah, well, we're going to be business owners, so we're going to leverage everything, and kind of this, well, I'm a lazy accountant type thing, because first off, accountants are some of the hardest working people out there. And I think there's so much of our personal worth sometimes that we can feel is tied up with how much we're working.
Mm.
And I think really we need to be shifting that to how much value are we providing to our clients as
Mhm.
professional service people. And I know you do that for your CPA clients, and of course we do that for our business owner clients as well. It doesn't matter how much time I'm at my desk. It matters how much I'm benefiting my client. And that, just uncoupling those two things, time and value, is huge.
Mm. Talk about a mindset shift.
Woo.
That's a big one, for especially for people that have been in this profession for a long time and who kind of grew up under that mindset of minimum hours and sort of this burnout cycle that is very common in this profession, unfortunately. But couldn't agree with you more. I think there comes a point where you just can't squeeze anything else out of
Right.
of that orange. You've gotten everything you can, and you could try to squeeze harder, but nothing else is, you're not going to get anything else. And so really balancing and reinventing our relationship to recovery, like rest and recovery alongside hard work, and seeing that those two work well together,
Mhm.
and striking the right balance increases your revenue likely. uh, Absolutely increases your capacity to think strategically, which is often what's missing. If firm leaders could just take a step back and say, how could we work smarter, not harder here?
Mhm.
That would make a huge difference for many of them, but they're
Absolutely.
not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and we can think of ourselves like professional athletes. I know that's a little egotistical sounding potentially, and I know that's not kind of how our tribe likes to view ourselves sometimes, as kind of the a special person. But at the same time, you know, they train all the time. They work all the time,
Yeah.
and they take their days off. Because they have to. They have to. That's the only way to have the ability to perform at peak when they need
Mhm.
to perform at their peak. So.
Absolutely. Good analogy.
I've left kind of to the very end, one of the elephants, one of the elephants in the room. You know, Firm leaders are busy. I mean, whether or not they've, cracked the capacity code, or um, they're just still stuck in it every day.
Yeah.
How do you capture their attention long enough to, get them to listen to you, and of course, eventually, hopefully engage with you, and improve their situation?
It's a great question, and something that continues sometimes to, I think that just shows up for a lot of people who are trying to sell into the accounting space, is how do we? Because there's so much noise, and they're, they're right targets for a number of different things, right? Whether it's tech sales or AI or anything else. So I think there's a few things that are really important. One being, I've become more and more clear about who my ideal client is, who I can partner best with, and who I can provide the best value for. And this is something that I preach in a way to my clients about them selecting clients, is being very clear about who do we want to work with, who can we do our best work with. That's really important. So for me, it's a certain persona, if you will, of person, and I've come to realize that that's not everyone who's open to making the kinds of changes and adjustments in their firm that we are looking to help them make. So, for example, a firm has to be open to change. We can't be super committed to the way we've always done it, because so much of this adding value and building capacity requires us to do things differently. We can't keep doing it the way we've always done it and expect a different result. So if you're committed to that, I really have made a conscious effort to, we call it preaching to the unconverted. I'm not going to chase you around and try to convince you that you have a capacity problem, or that you have a, dwindling value in your business, or that you have a ton more value you could be tapping into but aren't. In some ways, by me being a little bit more specific about who I'm working with, that allows them to self-select and find me, which is great, or to resonate with what I talk about if you were to meet me at a conference or see me at a state society or something. So in terms of just to kind of broaden that scope, I think that's why it's so important to niche and be specific, because that applies to firms also. They could be doing that with their clients.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so that's part of it, right? They've already, in many cases, at least had this inkling of we have a problem here, right? We're already maxed out. We're turning away business, or our team is maxed and isn't taking the amount of vacation and downtime that we would like to, or we aren't as the owners, right? Maybe they're having that conversation of, I started this business for more freedom, and look at me now, not having the freedom that I wanted. This isn't what I signed up for. So that, again, just kind of highlights, all right, here's somebody who's ready to make a change. That makes it a lot easier to speak to them when I can come to them and say, I can solve this challenge, this thing that keeps you up at night, or the thing that is bothering you the most about the current state of your practice, your business. So that helps. And I'm not going to chase somebody around who's not in that place. That's not a good use of my time or theirs. And that's okay. That, maybe there's somebody else out there for them. So that's one, is solving a big challenge. And then I also think that I've never been a salesy type person. So I like to simply understand what the business challenges are. What are those ways that I can support them? And if we have solutions, and I think our approach is different enough that it sometimes catches firm leaders off guard, like, wow, this isn't what I was expecting, or this isn't how this conversation's gone with other strategists or consultants. But that really comes from my commitment to make sure that I'm doing right by those clients. And I think that's because I was in a seat in a firm, so I wouldn't have wanted that to happen. I wouldn't have wanted my firm to get taken advantage of in any way or something like that. So that's really, I think, the extent of chasing them around, right? And I think it's important to note that when we're so busy being busy, it does pull our attention away from making some of the changes and sort of working smarter, not harder. So if we stay on this hamster wheel of just trying to crank out the next tax return or the next task on your to-do list, we do miss some of those opportunities to slow down and say, what change could I make that could potentially alter the course or alter my reality going forward? I don't have to just accept this as it is what it is. So I think that's important too. Sometimes I really try to be that intentional pause in their day. Like, hey, take an hour, take 20 minutes. Let's talk about this and see if there is a strategic opportunity that you could take advantage of here.
Hey everybody, I want to take a second here to share something about who we are and why we make this show. You're probably here because either you or a client of yours is thinking about buying or selling a business, bringing in investment, or planning an eventual exit. And that is why we call this show Max Value. We provide you with information and insights about how to maximize the value of your business. Our team at Town Advisory guides business owners through the crucial, often once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to exit their business. We use our trademarked Exit Builder program to help business owners prepare early, protect the value they've built, and obtain maximum value through an exit. And the secret is, our clients define what value means to them. Taking the right steps now can make all the difference in creating a successful outcome for yourself, your family, and your work team. If you think you're ready for the next step in understanding and increasing the value of your business, make a comment, send me a message on LinkedIn, or send me an email. All those links are in the show notes. Yeah, it is definitely hard to make somebody want to talk about taking kind of a short-term loss, if you will, because people are equating their hours to dollars. I
Yeah.
could be billing X amount of dollars for this time.
Hmm.
Making that loss opportunity cost and and trying to think, okay, well, that's going to then, lead to something better in the future. And I sometimes think about it, kind of the opposite way, where it's the 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 pain threshold, because change is painful,
Yeah.
especially for people like us.
Yeah.
Uh, and it has to be somebody has to be feeling and recognizing a pain point acutely enough where they say, okay, well, changing this, as painful as that will be, is going to be much less painful and beneficial over the long term than having to than experiencing what I experience every busy season for the rest of my life, right?
Yeah.
And set that way, then suddenly people are can be, if it's in their minds, can be incentivized to move.
There's another mindset shift that you just made me think about when you said that, and that is there's something that business owners do, and accounting firm leaders are sort of guilty of this also, which is if it's just my time, it's not costing me anything.
Oh my God.
So we're not being honest with ourselves about what some of the status quo or what we're currently doing is actually costing us. I'll give you a good example because you were talking about my hourly billing rate. And so I was working with this organization that wanted to put in, they wanted to modernize their performance evaluation process for their team, which would solve a lot of things. It would definitely speed up people's progression, makes it a little bit more user friendly, keeps those goals and development objectives front of mind, easier to see and monitor and track, as opposed to doing it on a Word document, right? Where we set goals once a year and then they live on a shelf somewhere. So all had good intentions. So then they started to look at the investment in some of these softwares, which some can be fairly expensive, others not as much. But it was going to be somewhat significant. Let's, for argument's sake, call it $20,000 or something like that. And they said, oh gosh, it's not that big of a problem. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. It's the short-term thinking, right? And then I asked, how are you doing this right now? How are you monitoring and evaluating performance now? Well, we have everyone fill out this self-evaluation form on a Word document. Our admin collates it, puts it all in one document. So there's time and hours that we're paying for.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get all of our partners, 10 of them, in a room. Let's just for fun call it $500 an hour, but it's more than that, right? For a day and a half.
Oof.
Run that number. That number becomes very large very quickly. And we talk about each individual person's performance and we argue back and forth about, are they a top performer, middle, where do they fall? So easily every year they're spending, not in cash, but they're, foregoing its opportunity cost,
Mm-hmm.
$50,000 or $60,000 in personnel time, possible billable time that we're using on this process. So you probably can't cut it all back to zero, but could we cut it in half? And so we're saving 30, but we're spending 20. Absolutely. So we have to just start being really honest about what is that opportunity cost. In other words, what's not getting done because we're spending time doing it this way.
Absolutely.
And be clear about some of those current processes. So I think if firms looked at that, it would be a much easier decision to make to say, this is something that we need to invest in because it's actually going to save us money, not in 5 years from now, but pretty much immediately.
Absolutely. Measure the right things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to throw something at you here. Yeah. You touched on, use of AI, and obviously that's a huge, topic these days. But in relation to CPA firms, there's a number of ways to leverage, right? There's personnel leverage, there's technological leverage. Um, looking at both, outsourcing and offshoring,
Mhm.
something I'm a huge proponent of, and also, technological leverage, use of AI and systems, etc. What are some of the things that you're seeing just as trends in the industry?
So I've definitely seen more firms and smaller firms curious about or taking on offshoring resources, which is great. I think they're finding that it's also not a magic, silver bullet or anything like that, that they have to actually
Mhm.
train people. They have to have, there's actually an interesting correlation between the two, but from hiring offshore talent, we still have to have clear processes in place, clear expectations and procedures, needs to be well documented. And we ultimately need to lead, provide feedback, hold people accountable, just the same as if they're in your own office or working remotely for your firm in some other state. Um, but I think it's a great option, and it has absolutely helped build capacity, especially when, for firms in areas that they don't have huge pools of students to pick from, more
Mm.
rural or remote areas, smaller towns, towns that don't have a huge sort of pool of people like to go live there. And I guess ironically or related with AI, firms are finding the same thing. To really get ROI and significant capacity boost with AI, they're finding that they have to have clear procedures, clear processes, well documented, and it has to be consistent. So we have to hold people accountable to using the systems and using the processes in the way they were designed. So there often is a little bit of trial and error. So I'm seeing that, especially when a firm is looking at putting AI into a significant process, like
Mhm.
trying to automate the full 1040 preparation process from start to finish. That requires really clear systems and processes for AI to be able to function there. What I'm seeing more commonly is, I guess, what I would consider like a niche or a very targeted solution. So, using things like tax research or
Mhm.
document organization tools that are AI driven, using some of the AI functionality already built into your CRM or your project management system. That's, I think, a place where you can get some pretty quick ROI from those AI tools.
Yeah, and I like how you kinda ended that with you don't necessarily have to take, the big swing right off the bat, and there's a lot of places where people can use offshore, out of state,
Mhm,
staff or, technology in some way to really smooth out, some, capacity issues,
mhm.
but in small bites, not necessarily doing it, full 1040 tax preparation, which may
Yeah.
or may not be that feasible, especially for smaller firms. Um, but, if you can get a 20% solution, well, guess what? That's still a fifth of the work that's getting done in a way that you now don't have to, be spending
Mhm,
your time. So I
mhm.
think a lot of times people think of these solutions as an all or nothing. Well, I'm going to fire all my staff and get them, you call up the Philippines
Yeah.
or India or whatever, right? No, these are all AI and outsourcing really are about, or offshoring are really all about augmenting and
Mhm.
making your people, superhuman, in a sense.
Yeah.
So we just have, it's interesting. We're talking about, this whole conversation. We're talking about mental shifts, more than really anything else, and that wasn't what I expected out of the conversation, but I love it. Great.
Well, it is important, and I think, a lot of this is, that is a mindset shift. And you had asked me earlier about, um, how do we basically take small wins versus getting overwhelmed by the gravity of, oh my gosh, we could spend or invest millions or billions of dollars into modernizing the firm or firm improvement. Likewise, when firms haven't put development programs in place or have never sort of done the personal development at the management group level, at the C-suite level, they're, gosh, what are you going to ask me to do? And that in itself can be a little bit overwhelming. I think any of this can be done in bite sizes. And I actually recommend that because you can put something in place also from a change management perspective also.
Yes.
Put something in place, have people experiment with it. We're doing our part to manage the change and communicate and get people on board and aligned with it. But then we start to see benefit. That's going to have people that much more bought in to phase 2, whatever that phase 2 is. If we're thinking about AI, or if we're going to expand our offshoring, or, in the cases of putting development programs and accountability in place, like much of what we do with firms, it's a great practice to start small, have people see the benefit, and then it's more palatable, I guess, to say, all right, well, now we can make a bigger investment in the next phase because we're more comfortable with the fact that we're going to see returns on that. So I always think that saying yes to something is better than saying no to all of it. Maybe you're not going full-fledged, we're automating everything, and I wouldn't recommend that, because most firms, and actually organizations, there was I believe it was in the MIT study recently about AI, was saying that most pilot programs with AI fail, or fail to produce the intended outcomes. And I would argue that you could find similar data about most change management initiatives, because we are biting off more than we can chew, and we're not actively managing the process, or we haven't done that front end work that we talked about. So it's all linked together. It's sort of the same process and same mindset required.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way I tend to think about it is, what is it that you're leveraging? So all these things are leveraging or changing something, as you said, but what is it that we're starting with? So if you're trying to increase your technological leverage with AI, well, do you have a solid process that works now effectively before trying to amp that up and multiply it out, many times? And I find this is actually the biggest problem with, the offshore staffing as well. How are you working with your staff now? Is it effective now? Are the processes clear? Yada, yada, yada. Where making that staff farther away and just throwing more bodies at it is actually going to make the process, well, it's not going to change the process, and might make the outcome even worse than it is now, by not doing it in a well-considered manner. So
I just saw this recently. So it's amazing to me. These things are kind of clicking together as we're talking, like how similar those two things are. So whether you're thinking about automation as your solution to capacity, or offshoring, or maybe a combination of the two, you're absolutely right. If it's, I always talk about AI, you could layer AI onto a really inefficient process. That's just going to make your AI very inefficient. And I ran into that when I started to put it in place in my business to, it helps me. I use it right now to take client calls and turn it into statements of work. It saves me a lot of time. It's not perfect, but it's a great starting point, and it's better than me doing it all myself or doing it from memory. But in that process, I realized that I used to have like 6 or 7 different formats of statements of work that I would send. And it was confused. It's like, how do I know which format you want? And so similarly, I see it a lot with tax prep processes, where we've trained our in-house humans to say, here's the process, except when you're working with this partner, except when with this client, we do it a different way. And except for this batch of clients, we do, all these alternative processes, which arguably is very hard for your team, your in-house team, to kind of like grasp and embody and have that become second nature. It's going to take a long time, a lot longer than if it were one process. And same if you're going to layer AI onto that, or if you're going to train somebody offshore. Much easier to do if you have one process, maybe two, right? Maybe it's two,
Right.
depending on like different types of clients, different outputs. I can understand it not all fitting into one, but we got to eliminate some of those exceptions to the rule, which are arguably slowing you down today, right? We could fix that now just by fixing the process, and you'd already gain some efficiency or capacity.
Oof. And I think every time one of us brings up a point, there's something that springs into mind for the other person, which is great. When you have those exceptions, because they happen. I mean, every
Sure.
individual case is going to have its own little, fun fact. But trying to figure out where you truly have an exception versus being able to fit something kind of in the box, that's normalized and something you can templatize perhaps, is a hard part of what we do, but it is something that we need to get efficient at and effective at. And also, okay, so now we can put 80% of a particular case in a box, or 90% of a particular case in a box, where AI, lower level staff, whatever, some kind of leverage can help you move the ball forward, all that way. And then, maybe the person who has that, that level of judgment, etc., at the higher level can then say, okay, that all that said, and taking into account, a couple of exceptions, now what do we do? That's so much easier to get it to that level and reduce the decision fatigue on that higher level person, that it's, oh gosh, it's so much more worthwhile. It makes for a better life for the professional.
Yeah. I also think sometimes we're putting a lot of pressure on, I don't want to say the wrong people, but maybe I'll say the people that get thrust into that room to make the decision about the process that's not always their skill set. I mean, we're talking about detail oriented, what I would call a fact finder, right? We're looking at these detail oriented people who the value that they bring to their clients is to dig into the weeds, dig into the details. And now we're asking them to come out from this level up to the 40,000 foot level and have a more strategic conversation. And not only have the conversation, but generate it themselves, come up with the idea, come up with the system. And I don't know that we give enough credit for the fact that coming up with those systems and processes is a skill set. And it's not one that comes naturally to everybody. So if that's a struggle in your organization, I think it's one of my favorite things to do. I think, and again, there are people out there, in addition to myself, that love to do that, and that's their specialty. But that's hard to expect that of somebody if that's not your skill set. Just like for me, it was very hard to get me to care about and be passionate about tracking down those little exceptions when I was auditing. Just sort of, it took a lot of energy for me. And so likewise, I think we need to recognize that that's the value of sometimes having outside support, is they can help us think through. Then we just have to make the decision about what works best for us. And even that can be a real time savings in the long run, instead of you having to go back and retool or rework this process over and over again, when it doesn't work.
Awesome. That's a good button to put on the top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a couple of questions just for you, just to get
Sure.
to know you a little bit. Can you, Erin, tell me something that's not on your LinkedIn or on your website profile?
I am an avid golfer, and I'm also a wine enthusiast. So I played college golf for a little while, now mostly play for fun, and love a scramble or a charity outing. That is like my idea of a great time and great way to spend a day. And then I also went and I believe it was right before the pandemic, got my level 1 sommelier certification. So all that has done for me recently is put the burden of choosing the wine on me at every dinner I'm at with friends. So it's really fun. Really fun. Great. I mean, I really like it and enjoy. I just think the science of making wine is so interesting, and how it can change from one year to the next just as a result of the weather. That kind of fascinates me.
Yeah, so much depends on the weather.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are you reading these days?
I am in scaling mode for myself and for my clients. So I just read a book called The Science of Scaling, and I'm now in the process of reading, I believe it's called 10X, the 10X code, something like that. I believe it's, oh gosh, don't misquote me, Grant Cardone maybe. Yes, the 10X rule, Grant Cardone. I just cheated and looked at it over here on my desk. So those are kind of along the same lines and same theme, but that's what I'm reading.
Gotcha. Cool. I'll have to check those out. That's kind of my secret, is I always mine everybody for, the good recommendations on what to read. So do you have any offers or giveaways that you want to provide to the audience here?
Well, a couple things. I would encourage them to go to my website for the latest dates and information. But one thing we offer that I would encourage everyone to take advantage of are executive forums. These are small group conversations. We bring partners and managing partners together from firms all across the country, and we pick a topic. These are happening just about monthly, depending on the time of year. So that's why I said check the website for the next date that's upcoming. But we pick a hot topic, we share best practices, what we're seeing out in the market, and allow for some really safe and friendly discussion among peers. And so those are really popular. They're completely complimentary. We do that just to contribute back to the profession. So would definitely invite anyone to join us there. And if something that we talked about today resonates, if you're looking to build capacity in your firm and want to kind of understand where you would even start in that process, we have some assessments that are available on our website, and also always open to having a conversation with you.
That's awesome. And is the best place to get you on your website, or another way to contact you?
Website, or they can certainly find me on LinkedIn under Erin Daiber, but both. And then the website is wellbalancedaccountants.com.
All right. Well, Erin, gosh, this has actually been a very, very cool conversation, and it went in a couple different directions that I didn't expect, and I think it's so much the better for it. So I've loved having you on, and would love to have you on again.
It would be my pleasure. Would love to come back. Thanks so much.
Thank you. That's a wrap. You've been listening to Max Value Podcast. And if this episode provided any interesting information, hit that subscribe button, smash like, and drop a comment below. I'm Ben Town with Town Advisory, and I'll catch you next time.